We won't wait until the end for questions. This is a participating interactive chat. If you want to throw a question at me, then please do. Don't wait until the end. Just signal. I might not be able to get to all of them, but I'll do my best. And if we're running out of time, my email address is mikehogarth@aol.com. So just drop me a line. The inner workings of a provincial DC. This presentation is open to all because, let's be honest, everyone wants to be a DC, especially stewards. It is entitled Walk Straight and Don't Bump Into Things. I was requested by the Deputy Provincial Grand Master a couple of weeks ago to put something together that you would find, hopefully, entertaining and light-hearted, particularly during these difficult times when we're unable to meet. I thought that maybe you might enjoy some of the memories of DC, or rather DCs, as I've been helped with this presentation by stories from past DCs, such as the Provincial Grand Master, Eric Reimer, Phil Hall, Howard Smith, the current Provincial Grand Director of Ceremonies, Peter Clark, along with other past DEPs and ADCs. So if it doesn't go well, it's their fault. If it goes well, then of course, I'll take the credit. I hope you enjoyed. The majority of Warwickshire lodges work emulation ritual, and the Emulation Lodge of Improvement at Great Queen Street functions perfectly well without a Director of Ceremonies. It is a clear indication that the Director of Ceremonies is not an indispensable officer. However, as a past provincial DC, I would, of course, have to disagree with that, as you would expect. In most Warwickshire lodges, the Director of Ceremonies is appointed, but for somewhere an experienced past master is just in situ permanently. Next to the Worshipful Master, the office of Director of Ceremonies is the most important in the lodge and should be taken very seriously. Brethren, are not my words, but the words of very worshipful brother Graham Redman, the Deputy Grand Secretary and Senior Preceptor in the Emulation Lodge of Improvement. Notice, brethren, I said Lodge of Improvement, not Lodge of Instruction. There's a distinct difference, but that's a subject for another night. The aim of the Lodge DC is to ensure the efficient running of the Lodge meeting and the festive board. The role of a provincial DC is no different. It's about the smooth running of an installation ceremony, predominantly, but not exclusively, and the festive board, whilst looking after whoever you're escorting. But first of all, I'll give you a little about my provincial background. I was appointed and invested as a provincial ADC in 2011, and again in 2012, a DEP DC in 2014 and 2015. In between, in 2013, I was appointed as an ADC in the Royal Arch. In 2018, I was made Provincial Senior Grand Warden. I'm currently DC of Warwickshire Provincial Grand Director of Ceremonies Lodge and was the DC of Warwickshire Installed Masters Lodge. So, the question, are DCs born or are they made? The first Provincial Grand Director of Ceremonies I remember is Worshipful Brother Roger Parker in 2001. Then Worshipful Brother Ems, Worshipful Brother Phil Hall in 2008, Worshipful Brother David Stanford, and now Worshipful Brother Peter Clark. Worshipful Brother John Ems proposed me into Freemasonry, and Worshipful Brothers Phil Hall and David Stanford then coached and developed me through my time as a provincial ADC or deputy. But if you ask those illustrious brethren the question, they would answer, I think that they're made. None of them ever thought they could do the job or would rise to the levels they have reached. It's all down to hard work, meticulous research, and no little skill. When I received the letter asking me if I was offered the position of a provincial ADC, would I accept it? From the Provincial Grand Secretary, I almost fell over. I shall never forget the day I received the letter on the first Friday in December in 2010. I arrived home from work at about 6:45, and there was an envelope on the map from the provincial office. I didn't expect anything, so I was opening it whilst walking from the hall into the lounge. By the time I got to my chair, I saw the contents. It was like an electric shock, brethren. I threw the letter in the air, I left it there on the floor, went into the kitchen, got a large glass of red, and went and sat in my chair. I then read the letter probably about 10 times to make sure it wasn't past Assistant Provincial Grand Director of Ceremonies. Further into the letter, it asked me to give the Provincial Grand Director of Ceremonies a call if I had any questions. I then called Worshipful Brother Phil Hall and said, "Is there any good reason you can give me as to why I would not accept this job immediately?" He laughed and it went from there. You have to know, brethren, it was the job I coveted most. In my lodge, the Lodge of Integrity, John Ems, John Norman, Mel Mason, Roy Gurley, Steve Tranter, in recent years have all been provincial ADCs. I was then trained, coached, schooled, along with the other ADCs, by Phil Hall and his two deputies, David Greenwood and Fred Lunn. I was then released into the province in September 2011 with one Worshipful Brother Peter Clark. When you go out with your escort on that first meeting, you are so nervous. I can remember mine so well. I had a warden first, so I didn't have to call for an incoming call. So my first bit of live action was the salute to the warden, Peter Sorrell, and the rest of the province after the Grand Officer, after the minutes. I got up, straightened my apron, walked out to the middle thinking, come on, you know this, you've rehearsed it hundreds of times. By the time I got into the middle of the lodge and stood to give the salute, I can remember trying to stop my legs from shaking. My mouth was so dry, my tongue was sticking to the roof of my mouth. But then the training kicked in and I was fine. A past provincial senior Grand Warden, Worshipful Brother Howard Smith, tells the story of his first outing as an ADC, which was escorting the provincial Grand Master. What pressure. But all went well. The ceremony, the salutes, the festive board, the lot. Howard was very pleased with himself, puffing out his chest until the PGN said to him, "Well, Malcolm, that went really well." Obviously hadn't made the impression he thought. Talking of forgetting names, Worshipful Brother David Greenwood, as an ADC, was escorting Phil Wills when he was a warden, now the Provincial Grand Master in the Mark. David got up to do his con out, but just had a complete mental block over Phil's name. Somebody prompted and David got through it, relatively unscathed, but embarrassed. However, the next time that David escorted Phil Wills, when it came to his salute, all below the rank of, Phil held up a card on which he'd written his own name, so David wouldn't forget it again. David Greenwood suppressed the chuckle and carried on as the pro that he is. As an aside, Worshipful Brother Phil Wills did exactly the same to Worshipful Brother Eric Reimer when escorting him. As DCs, we have some precious items that we treasure and are the guardians of. These include the jewel we wear on our collar and the distinctive white wand that sets a provincial DC and Gandalf the Grey from any other DCs in Warwickshire. Brethren, we're paranoid about leaving our wands at home when on escorting duties. So much so that we all have little rituals to make sure they're on the back seat of the car, in the boot, front passenger footwell, just somewhere regular that you know. However, I work in the motor industry and my car got lent out to a customer, complete with my wand, and I was on duty that night. However, because I knew there were provincial ADCs at Stirling Road that night, that weren't escorted, I knew I could borrow one from a DC who just happened to have it in the car. The current Provincial Grand Director of Seminaries, Peter Clark, was forming the columns outside Alderson House in preparation for the annual procession down Warwick High Street for the church service at St Mary's, when his wand snapped in two, the brass connector failing. He then had to hold the wand in a fist so that it appeared normal while leading the procession with the Provincial Grand Master down the High Street and into the church, and continued to hold the wand like that all the way through the service. It transpired that it was the very same wand that worshipper brother Roger Parker had accidentally dropped over the balcony a few years earlier at Stirling Road, when it landed vertically on its face, javelin style, and bounced straight back up. As DCs, we can't hide. We're there front of house, so to speak. If an item of our dress, our attire, our shoes, socks, jackets, tails, our regalia are a hair's breadth out, it's noticed. However, I've been in a lodge where a brother has got odd socks on, odd shoes, strangely enough, one brown, one black, jacket not matching the trousers, and I don't mean morning suits. In my first year as a DEP, one of the ADCs had one of those dress moments. As he was leaving the house, he got interrupted by a telephone call. Before departing, he checked his wand and case in the car and set off. On arriving, he got his case and wand out of the car and reached in for his jacket. He checked the boot, passenger footwells, no jacket. We all know that moment when, despite being outside on a wet January evening, you can visualise your jacket on the back of the chair in the kitchen and your hands go all clammy and you break out into a cold sweat. But there are certain qualities we look for in a budding provincial ADC, and these include the ability not to panic but to improvise, not enough time to get home and back. He thought rationally and outside the box and improvised. He did us proud. He visited every charity shop in Ulster looking for a dark suit in his size. Do you know, brethren, how many charity shops there are in Ulster? There are 12, and he found a dark suit in the 11th that fitted. Result, the show goes on. Do we have any questions at this stage, brother?
Good evening, Worshipful Mike, Brother Mike. Good evening, all. Having been one of 4 recently honoured by our Provincial Grand Master with an active rank of Provincial Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies, my question is of particular personal relevance. Did you have any particular method of learning names and ranks of attending officers, as I am sure many were at very short notice?
Okay, thanks, Andy. I guess my reaction to the question is just prep early. I used to get the full names and ranks of those attending from emails you get from the attendees and the lodge secretary. Bit difficult this year, but keep the programme handy from Provincial Grand Lodge's annual meeting for all the new acting office order. Never take the list for granted, because sure as eggs are eggs, it will change. And I would keep the lodge in my pocket and in my diary at work. And I would read through them at various times each day prior to the meeting. Sit them in the lodge in rank order. So therefore the name, the order of the names that you'll introduce them. And that way you'll also identify the interloper who didn't tell you who was coming. Thanks for the question, Andy.
Thank you.
Moving on, brethren. One of the things we're taught during our training is that when we arrive, we put our wand into the wand stand. You'd be amazed how many lodges forget we need one. But it's not a problem for us because we get to the lodge room an hour plus early. So we just steal the lodge DC's or the ADC's wand stand. We park our wand so everyone knows that we're there. We go round and round the lodge doing our checks. Are the columns on the warden's pedestal right? Tracing boards in the right order. I once had to stop a meeting as when we opened in the second, we got 2 first-degree tracing boards out. The provincial tiler tiled for them, so he wasn't happy. And I hasten to add, brethren, when I checked them, they were correct. But you'd be amazed how many times we check things and they're correct, but somebody changes them. I once in the lodge noticed that the volume of the sacred law was facing the wrong way, i.e. away from the master. I corrected it, carried on doing my checks, recircuited the lodge, and it had changed back to its original position. I corrected it, but this time stood guard over it so it couldn't be changed until we opened. What you have to be careful of though is, having parked your wand in the lodge room, you don't get carried away and end up separated from your wand as the worshipful master processes in and you're outside with your escort. I've nearly done this, and I know an ADC that has, and I'll tell you the story. The ADC was recovering from back surgery, and an assistant provincial grandmaster, or it could have been a deputy provincial grandmaster, who'd recently dislocated his shoulder a day or 2 earlier and was very sore. In the changing room, the assistant provincial grandmaster asked if he could be assisted in getting changed. The ADC, of course, said yes, as long as nothing was dropped on the floor, as that the worshipful master had processed in, and the opening ode had been sung, which is our cue as a DC to enter the lodge. This he did and said in the grand voice of a DC, "Worshipful master, brother wardens and brethren, good evening." Everyone responded, and the ADC said, "Worshipful master, can I have my wand back, please?" So what does a provincial ADC or DEP DC do? It's our job, once we know where we're going and who we're escorting, to liaise with the lodge DC and the secretary to ensure that the niceties are observed, that tradition is respected, your escort is acknowledged, and the lodge is regular. Which sounds relatively simple, doesn't it? If the lodge has its warrant, book of constitutions, etc., all is well. However, brethren, things do go wrong in any lodge. With a few lodges, the warrant is taken home by the worshipful master, which is fine if all is well in the lodge and that the worshipful master is in good working order. There was a situation where a provincial ADC was doing his checks an hour or so prior to the opening, as the tiler was putting everything out. The provincial ADC was saying hello to everyone as they arrived, checking nothing had changed on the running order with the DC, the secretary, and the installing master, as the worshipful master was ill. As the time approached, he broke away from the brethren to look around, and all was well, except where was the warrant? "Excuse me, brother secretary, where's the warrant?" "Oh, don't worry, the worshipful master brings it with him." The ADC pointed out that the worshipful master was ill and had any contingency plans been put in place. Just then, the provincial Grand Master arrived, one right worshipful brother, Stanley Allen Legs. A stickler for getting it right, who took no prisoners. The lodge secretary, obviously not quite understanding the gravity of the situation, said, "I'm sorry, right worshipful provincial Grand Master, the warrant is at the worshipful master's house, and he's ill, so it wouldn't be on display this evening." The provincial Grand Master breathed in and raised himself to his full height of about 5'6", and said, then someone had better go and fetch it, because without it, the installation isn't going to happen. The secretary gulped and sent someone off to fetch it. They sat down to dine that evening an hour late. A Warwickshire installed masters meeting, where we ought to do things right. We do currently, of course, where prior to the meeting, the DC was checking that everything was in place. The apron for the incoming master, warrant, tracing board, columns, etc., etc. But for some reason, there was no book of constitution. The secretary had forgotten it. The provincial Grand Master at that time, again, Worshipful Brother Stanley, said through clenched teeth, I don't care if it's a copy of Enid Blyton's famous Five, as long as it resembles the Book of Constitution, put it on the pedestal. Common sense prevailed. Our current provincial Grand Master, when he was an ADC, the job he acknowledges is the best in the province, was escorting Right Worshipful Brother Stanley to a 50-year certificate presentation. The then provincial Grand Master presented the certificate with the usual conversation with the recipient, who was of advancing years and accompanied by his son. This is the point that as an ADC, we're even more on stage. We puff out our chest and announce, be it known that by command of the Right Worshipful Brother Stanley Allen late, that Worshipful Brother Smith, who was initiated into Freemasonry on the 4th day of April, Anna Lucas 5960, into the lodge of, no, I wasn't, he said in a not very quiet voice, who was installed into the chair of King Solomon of this, the Arts and Crafts Lodge number, no, I wasn't. Brethren, it's a DC's nightmare, because the only people in the lodge room that know the dates are the PGM, the recipient, and you. But the ADC ploughed on with the proclamation, starting to doubt his memory, until a point where the argumentative recipient, hearing that he was exalted into, etc., etc. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? No, I wasn't, he said, to which his son intervened and put our provincial Grand Master out of his misery and said in a very loud voice, yes, you were, Dad. To which he responded, so I was, so I was. Columns in, brethren. You were warned as you go through your training to be aware of who is attending the meeting. The rulers, past rulers, grand officers, acting provincial officers, who you should have outside the lodge, and who you should call out to form the column. Now, when you're a newbie, you might also get a new assistant provincial Grand Master to escort. You ask him what sort of column would you like. After your second or third meeting, brethren, you stop asking that question. The answer is always, let's go large. So as the new ADC hasn't thought it through and asked acting officers or all officers with the rank of or above, he asks, may the officers present and past of the Provincial Grand Lodge of Warwickshire and any other province, etc., etc. As a result, the lodge room empties like a drain to form the column. The new assistant provincial Grand Master grins. Fantastic. But you look down the corridor, down the stairs, up the stairs, depending on whether you're at 7th Street, Stratford or Ulster. Your columns are now heading towards the centre of whatever town you're in. The new assistant provincial Grand Master is now well pleased that he has such a grand column. What a fine ADC he has. But all is okay if you're out on your own. However, if you have a past deputy provincial Grand Master out with you as well, and he looks down the conquering look at you, looks to the heavens whilst shaking his head, you think your career as a DC is about to come to a shuddering halt. But the ADC who did this is now a past provincial senior Grand Warden. What's your brother Peter Clark? Is there something you want to say about columns?
Well, you've been covering it really well. In fact, I've been sat here thinking, how the hell have I managed to do this job at all? Because it's, yeah, I think really to follow on, it was your answer really to Andy earlier about doing your preparation. And I mean, we've been through this so many years, haven't we, Mike? But doing that preparation, but I guarantee you that the 1 minute you take your eye off the ball, irrespective of how many times you've done it, it will bite you on the bum. And I think the one I remember just now, I suppose, is I was at 7th Street a couple of years back, did all the prep. I think it was an AFL meeting. And the presiding officer was upstairs, everything was done, the lodge were ready to process in, we were there. Great. All of a sudden, DC's peripheral vision kicks in. This chap comes through the front door. And he went straight into the changing room. So I thought, I better check and see who he is. So I went into the changing room and said, excuse me, I said, did you come for a committee meeting? Because he was dressed in civvies. And he says, no, he says, I was in the area, so I thought I'd pop in and join the meeting. I said, oh. I said, who are you? He says, well, I'm very worshipful brother Andrew Arthur. I went, no. I said, well, where are you from? He says, oh, from a province outside of here. I said, just wait there a second. And I ran up the stairs. The presiding officer was upstairs getting changed. And I explained that this very worshipful brother had attended. And the presiding officer looked at me and he said, well, Brother DC, he says, you know what to do. He had a big grin on his face. He was wearing a beard. I won't tell you who it was. He said, go upstairs. He says, improve him. So I did what any decent DC would do. I went back down the stairs, got hold of the lodge junior warden, and said, you've got a problem. You've got to go and prove somebody. And his response was, how'd you do that? What do you mean prove him? I said, oh no, leave it to me, I'll sort it. So I went into the side room with his brother. He was wearing a tweed jacket. He had a tweed type tie on, brown chinos and brown brogues. I said, you don't come from around these parts, do you? And he said, no, he says, I'm the past Grand Secretary of South Africa from on the the Grand Lodge of South Africa, the past Grand Secretary. I went, no, well, I've got to prove you so. He says, oh, not a problem. So we just about got away with it. And he put his apron on. And I said, can you just wait here a minute, sir? Because I better just go back upstairs and check with the presiding officer. And God bless him, the presiding officer said, well, we'll respect him, we'll treat him, and we'll give him the courtesy of a salute. He says, and he can join us in the column in. So there we are, right at the very beginning of it. So the last thing I did when the brother came out of the changing room, I'm nearly finished, I said to him, I will give you your salute after the minutes. He says, oh, that's very kind of you. I said, have you got a middle name? And he recited his name. There's about 7 names long. And so I thought, I shouldn't have asked him. And anyway, they processed in, and as they passed by me, he says, don't worry, Brother DC, just my first and second name will do. So it doesn't matter what preparation you do, this job can bite you on the bottom. But as long as you know what to do and ways of getting out of it, it's still a joy and a pleasure. But I think that's one. But we could do a whole session on this, Mike. But it's that's one that I particularly remember. And the presiding officer at the Provincial Grand Master was absolutely fabulous with this visitor. And even though his response to the salute went on for about 10 minutes, we managed to stop him in the end. But that was very nice anyway. That's one that I do remember. So preparation and then duck and dive.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that story, Peter. Now, brethren, imagine this. As an ADC, preparing prior to the meeting, a little bit like Peter was discussing there, everything you need to do, everything you have to do during the evening, get in there nice and early, everything is looking good. You're escorting the PGM. The location is probably the most atmospheric in Warwickshire, Guy's Cliff. And all seem to know their parts and what they're doing. As a DC, you think happy days. Until, a little bit like Peter's story, the secretary announces to the provincial Grand Master that the installing master has had some issues and may not be present. The provincial Grand Master, quick as a flash, answered, not a problem. My ADC will install the master event. The provincial Grand Master looked at me deadpan. Brethren, you can imagine my relief when the installing master arrived with about 15 minutes to spare. Of course, as a provincial ADC, my reaction was, Worshipful Master, I was so looking forward to installing the Master-elect, but I'm also pleased you're here because, of course, it's your right. There was a meeting I was escorting at where all went well until the inner workings, where I was watching a brother who didn't look particularly well, and all of a sudden his legs buckled and he collapsed just like he'd been shot. I just managed to catch him as he went down. Fortunately, the Tyler was a qualified paramedic. I instructed the Worshipful Master to call off, and the emergency services were called. We cleared and vacated the lodge room so the paramedics could stabilise his condition before they took him off to hospital. The Worshipful Master then called back on and we completed the evening. The brother was fine afterwards, by the way. Provincial ADCs and DEP DCs are the swans of the province. We glide seamlessly around with an air of authority, but paddling like mad below the surface, trying to keep all the plates spinning. We are the guests of the lodge that we attend, and the hospitality we receive is not something that we take for granted or forget. We have to walk a fine line of being there to contribute to making the evening special for the lodge, but without taking over or overriding the lodge's traditions and workings. We have the best job in the province, and despite the hundreds of meetings we'll have, by the time we hang up our wand, no two meetings have ever been the same. All we have to do is walk straight and don't bump into things. Any questions, brother?
Hi, Worshipful Brother Mike. My name's Stuart Benton. I've just been made a Provincial Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies. So it's very relevant tonight. Thank you for giving up your evening to talk to us. It was great. I just wondered, could you tell me what your highest high point and your lowest low point of your DC career was for you?
Ooh. Good question. Awful lot of high points. I would think probably the highest point was in fact after I was a DEP, and I was a past DEP. My friend Avatar Panasar and myself were asked to be up on the dais at Grand Lodge for our provincial Grand Lodge meeting when we met at Great Queen Street. And I think standing up there, where obviously royalty normally sit, looking out over the brethren of the province and our ladies up on the balcony looking resplendent is something, it's probably a memory I'll never forget. And then also being fortunate enough to be chosen as a warden with my good friend Paul Regan in 2018. Probably low spot was when I got to the end of my time as a DEP DC and sort of thinking that I'd fallen off the edge of the cliff until the following year when I was appointed as a senior warden. So the low point didn't last too long. Any other questions, brethren? Okay, well, thank you very much all for attending. I think we had a high point, Ian, of about 187.
We managed to get to 188 at one point.
Whoa! Fantastic. That's the highest attendance at one of these meetings so far. Brethren, as I said at the very beginning, my email address is mikehogarth@aol.com. If there's anything we haven't covered off, then please drop me an email. I'll do my best to answer it. If I can't, I'll make sure the Provincial Grand Director of Ceremony gets it, and he can respond to any questions. I'm just a stupid past Senior Grand Warden now, so it's all gone. Thank you, brethren.
Pleasure, Brother Mike. Thank you very much. Great.
Pleasure.
Most enjoyable. Very good.
Glad you enjoyed it.